talk about the other way, you are likely to get data, which is quantitative observations. So in the last lecture, we talked about questionnaires. Now we're going to talk about quantitative observations. So a note on that word quantitative first. So quantitative means anything that involves numbers. So you are counting or taking time in this case. Qualitative would be anything that involves words. So if you were basically describing what was going on in your program, that would be qualitative. Okay. One thing that often confuses people is that word qualitative does not necessarily mean quality. You can assess quality with a quantitative measurement equally as with a qualitative measurement. And the example I always gives, if I ever asked you on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being very satisfied and 1 being very dissatisfied, how would you rate the quality of a program? That is a quantitative question because I'm asking for a number. If I ask you to describe the quality of the program, that is a qualitative question because I'm asking you for words. But in this class, we're just going to talk about quantitative observations. So we're observing things and counting or taking time. So the first thing you would need to decide if you were doing quantitative observations is, as the observer, what is your role? And we can think of that on a spectrum. On one end, you are the person, hiding behind the fence or peering over the bushes. You are covert, you are hidden, you are not participating. They may not necessarily know you were there. So there are certain advantages to that because they don't know you're there, so you may not influence them. But you don't have quite the insider view, so that's the disadvantage. At the other end of the spectrum, you are fully a participant in the activity. You may have a better sense of what's going on by doing that, but people are aware you're observing them, so that's going to come with its own negatives and may actually impact behavior. So think about where you are as an observer. The other thing, before I mention specific techniques, you need to know is you need to clearly define the behavior you're observing. And you'll be surprised how often, if you go out with multiple people to observe something, and you thinking you're observing something as simple as crossing the street, that it's not as clearly defined as you think. And someone's like, well, that person went halfway and turned around. Does that count? I counted it. Did you count it? I don't know. So make sure it's very, very clearly defined to the extent like you almost are ridiculous the amount of detail. Okay. So let's talk about a few techniques here. So the most common one is a frequency count, sometimes called an event recording or a tally method. So in this case, you are simply counting the number of times you see a defined behavior. That's my email if you heard that. So how many times I count a participant smiling, how many times I count a participant sitting down, how many times I count a participant going through the activity line. So you're just looking for behavior and you're counting how many times it happens. Fairly straightforward. Okay. So documenting the number of times the target behavior occurs. That's what I just told you. Event recording, frequency count. Frequency count I think we use more often. Okay. The next method is duration. Here, instead of counting the number of times a behavior occurs, it's counting how long a behavior occurs. So how long are people in the dodgeball game before they get put out? How long does it take the participant to climb the rock climbing wall? How long is a participant in line? How long are they actually engaging in the activity? So it's a time. Your outcome here is a time, and a frequency count it's a number, and a duration it is a time. Third one we have is a latency recording. This is the amount of time. So here you're going to have a time again between a cue and a given behavior. For example, from the time I tell my participants to get in line, and by the way, we should try to minimize lines, but that's another speech. How long does it take them to actually get in line? From the time I tell everybody to get on the bus, how long does it take them to get on the bus? From the time the coach yells at the player to do something, how long does it take the player to do that thing? So the length of time between behavior and cue for something to happen. So again here, you're going to get a time result just like in duration. Fourth is a rating system or a checklist. Here we are looking for particular behaviors and we're checking them off as we see them. So in Parks and Rec, we have this thing called a Certified Playground Safety Inspector, CPSI. And that person has this checklist of things they'll look for related to safety. Wow, I'm popular, my email keeps going off. And so what they're looking for are things like the depth of the subsurface, the ground, are there bolts sticking out? So they're just going through a list and checking out things. When I got my professional tennis instructor certification, I would have an observer watch me, and they would have this checklist of things I was supposed to be doing. Did every participant hit the same number of tennis balls? Did I give immediate feedback? Did I refer to people by their name? So again, they're just checking it off. Check, 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 check. They're not counting necessarily. They're just checking off what behaviors you see. Okay. And the final one is time sampling or spot checking. Here you're looking for a behavior during a particular time to see if it occurred. So the time here confuses some folks. So your result here is a number, or a yes, no sometimes. It's not a time, but you're coming back every 15 minutes, every 30 minutes, every hour, and seeing if a behavior is happening. You see this a lot when people are looking at park usage. So you show up at a park every hour. So what are people doing in the park? Are they playing soccer on the playground? Are they throwing the frisbee? What are they doing? I come back the next hour. What are people doing? And then I have this list of each hour of what's happening at that time sample. So it's not a count here. It can be. You could say of the 7 times I showed up, 8 times, I guess that would work, 5 times people were playing frisbee. But you might grid it out and see what's there, but it's not a time. You're not looking for the amount of time people were participating. It's at that moment when I checked, here's what people were doing. Okay. So again, frequency count, we get a number. Duration, we get a time. Latency recording, we get a time behavior and cue. Rating system checklist, we're just checking things off. Sometimes we're rating them like it was a 3, it was a 2, or 1. Okay. And time sampling, spot checking, we're getting perhaps a list of things that are going on, perhaps we're counting this. That's it for quantitative observations. Let me know if you have any questions.